Good evening, 5th graders, and welcome to your first flip homework for Revolution. Let's review some of the things that we've been talking about in class. We know that the first cause of the American Revolution was actually this thing called the French and Indian War, or wars. And it's also known by another name in Europe. Do you remember what that name was? In Europe, it was referred to as the 7 Years' War. So if you can remember both those names, you're off and running. The 7 Years' War, the French and Indian War here in North America, was fought between two sets of allies, Half versus Bic. Half, you'll remember, stands for Huron in the Algonquin, and they love the French. They work together to be good trading partners for fur. The British teamed up with the Iroquois. Now, the British already hated the French, and the Iroquois hate the Huron and the Algonquin, so it seemed like a likely group to work together. We also include the American colonists here on this side. So Half versus Bic were your French and Indian War conflict. We know that the French and Indian War was won by the British, and what they were fighting over was that Ohio River Valley, the control of that area for trade and possibly for fertile land for actual growing of crops. Here are some of the standards that we're going to be looking on and reviewing. 5.14 talks about government, and it's really important to remember that the colonists felt a lot of ownership for their own government and their own decision-making process. You'll remember back to Pilgrims, Puritans, Jamestown, that they had their own legislative bodies. They made their own laws, like at the House of Burgesses. That in New England, we had our own town meetings. We made our own decisions. So we aren't very fond of England suddenly making those decisions for us. Here's the big focus for us, though, 5.15, explain the reasons for the French and Indian War. We just talked about that, the Ohio River Valley, and how it led to an overhaul of British imperial policy and the colonial response to those policies, blah, blah, blah. Basically, we're focusing on these things here. After fighting the French and Indian War in North America, England was in debt. And in order to pay for those debts, they needed to raise some revenue. And they thought the colonies and the colonists themselves seemed like a good place to raise that money, since, they thought they fought the war for them, although the colonists felt like they never really asked for that. To do this, England is going to institute a series of things. They're going to institute a series of what they call acts, most of which were some form of law, and many of them were some form of tax. Act, law, tax. So remember that, control, like Alt-Delete. This was their way of raising the revenue they needed to pay for the revolution, for the French and Indian War, excuse me. In class today, we worked on a lesson that talked about how to compare what issues the colonists had with England to some real-life scenarios that maybe you even have at home with your own parents. And I'm going to ask you tonight to make 4 vocabulary cards. Some words you may be more familiar with you than others. The pictures, I want you to try to do them. I don't expect perfection, and I have them here in the classroom if you'd like to come during Cougar and copy them off that. But just try to go for a basic, at least, good picture. They do not need to be colored. The first word is treason. T-R-E-A-S-O-N, okay? Here's the definition for treason. It means to go against your government. And if you notice, the picture over here shows a ship. This is a dock. There's a sign that says no non-British goods in Boston. And I mentioned to you probably last week something called the Navigation Acts, which had been a law from the 1600s that said the colonies could only ship and trade with England. And the colonists were not so very good about following that rule. In fact, they did a lot of smuggling of other countries, things like Dutch tea and Dutch wine. So the word treason means to go against your government when you break the law. Remember, you can always pause and write these cards down. You don't have to listen to me through the whole time. Do this at your own pace. The next word is boycott. Boycott means refuse to buy or refuse to do something in protest. Where this comes into play for the revolution is that the colonists, in order to make Parliament understand their unhappiness with these new taxes, boycott buying British tea, British cloth, and other things, and decide to make their own cloth or find tea from somewhere else. This causes merchants in England to lose money because they don't have anyone to sell it to, and this causes even more problems for the English economy. So the first 2 words are treason and boycott. The next word is repeal. Repeal means to take back, to end, or to cancel. You can see I put a stop sign over here. So the Stamp Act, which came in 1765, was repealed after merchants in England asked Parliament to please take it back because they were losing money because the colonists were boycotting buying their things. The last word is liberty, and it's an easy one. Liberty means freedom. And I do one of my before and after. 1775, here are my colonies. They belong to England. But in 1776, they consider themselves to be free, and they're going to fight for their independence. So these are your 4 vocabulary cards. Please make sure you come to school with them. Rooms 7 and 11 need to have them done for Thursday, and rooms 6 and 9 need to have them done for Friday. Pictures should be drawn. They do not need to be colored. They do not need to be done fancy or perfect. Please put in good effort. Show some grit. And see me at Cougar or another time if you have any questions. Mrs. Palmieri TV, signing off.